injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
It feels incredible.
Hello and welcome to this edition of FOF Live presented by Burger and Hicks. You could check them out on Burger and Hicks on their website and you can call them. But before we start, I want to give a quick shout out to Noah Burger. It is his birthday today. He's not joining us here, or maybe he will later on as he will be covering the Serie del Caribe for tonight. But a quick shout out to our favorite person with the best dimples in all of baseball, Mr. Burger. Only second to Martin Burger.
Yeah, do him a favor and follow him on his new Twitter account, his media account, Noah Burger Media, because, yeah, that'd be a very easy present for you to give him because he's trailing everybody in followers right now since starting over on that.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of news. We will get to the Serie del Caribe. We will talk the man behind us who is having a fantastic series and what that could potentially mean for the Marlins this upcoming year. But before that, let's talk about the two most important moves that have happened the last couple of days for the Fish. First one, Jonah Bride, Jordan Groshans. Groshans getting DFA'd. Marlins acquiring Jonah Bride from the soon-to-be Las Vegas Athletics, currently the Oakland Athletics. Carver, this is in your warehouse. First, talk to us. Jordan Groshans, it is a big name. This is the guy that they traded for just a couple trade deadlines ago. Former top 100 guy. When he was with the Blue Jays. Just what has happened to Groshans? How has he fallen off maybe from a top 100 guy who could potentially make the major soon to a guy who's getting DFA'd for a guy from the A's?
Yeah, it just never came together offensively for Groshans, unfortunately, and especially when you play in a very hitter-friendly environment for basically a full season with Jacksonville, and you can't hit really well at all. That's gonna make some waves about your name potentially being expendable. So, Groshans. I mean, yeah, he's made his. I mean, he was here. He was with the Marlins. He made his debut here, right? He debuted with the Marlins, and we all remember his brother like going crazy when he hit the home run and everything, which was cool. But yeah, it just didn't permeate with the bat. Really, is what it is. And there's also questions about defense. I really don't think he's a long-term shortstop. I think he's more of a third baseman / outfielder. So there's that as well. Defensive flexibility probably isn't what the Marlins thought they were getting when they got Jordan Groshans. So just a prospect that didn't really pan out, man. This is kind of what it is, especially with the bat. So yeah, hopefully he can click on somewhere else. The Marlins will have 6 more days to flip him somewhere else or outright him. So maybe he'll stick around. But I would think there may be some other teams that are interested to get something out of Jordan because he's still just 24, so there's still time. But yeah, I just don't think his bat is going to be that of a major league starter. And the Marlins think they could do better with Jonah Bride. So that's why he's here, and that's why Groshans is not.
Yeah, sometimes it's an oversimplification just to look at homers, but like that is especially what Carver mentioned about him sliding down the defensive spectrum. If he's not going to be a shortstop anymore, and he played 0 games at shortstop last year, then you need to make a value for it somewhere else. The power just never arrived for a guy that is based on his first round draft pedigree and the way that he was considered as a prospect early on. The thought was this guy has a pretty good frame. Once he fills out, he kind of has filled out that the power was going to come. He has never hit more than 7 homers in a single season of his pro career, including, as Carver mentioned, last year. The International League has become really hitter friendly, and for him to play close to every day and have 6 homers in that league while being a corner infielder, it was uncomfortable to watch him last year. Unfortunately, despite the pedigree, they made a pretty big not a huge bet, to be honest. That's why I was actually in favor of the trade when they made it. They traded Anthony Bass and Zach Pop to the Blue Jays to get him. Those are a couple of relievers that they thought they could like replace them internally with their own pitching development. They made a bet on his hit tool, that they thought it was a plus hit tool, and that even if he was an incomplete player in other regards, that he would have a decent floor as somebody that could contribute for a few years, at least on a part-time basis. And the hit tool just hasn't been quite what they thought it was. The other parts of his game. And what stood out to me immediately when he came over, even when he was having some success in 2022, is just not quite as athletic as I thought in terms of his general flexibility, but also his speed was not there either. Just not quite who he was billed to be. And going back to the fact that it just wasn't a huge gamble at the time, to be honest, I don't think it's something to rip Kim Eng about in hindsight for making that deal. But yeah, it was time. And the important part with this is to understand that just because he was DFA doesn't mean he's a goner. There is, to me, a pretty decent possibility that he clears waivers because of the time of year that we are at. This is the sweet spot where it's late in the offseason, but it's before the 60-day injured list comes into effect. So teams can't actually create wiggle room with injured guys to this point. Almost everybody, the Marlins are full. That's why they had to make this move. The majority of teams at this moment are full. They're full 40-man rosters. They going to make room for Groshans right now when they can't use the IL for another full week. So the timing of this, I think, was pretty smart. And if I had to guess, I do think he'll stick around and stay in the organization. Wouldn't be surprised if one team takes a shot on him because he's still only 24 years old. And for what we mentioned about the pedigree that he had just a few years ago, like it wouldn't surprise me either way. But if I had to guess one way or another, I think he's still going to be around this team and come to camp as a non-roster invitee.
Yeah, just a lot of things there with Groshans, him falling off just almost the radar for the Marlins. And if let's say he does come back to the Fish, what is his ceiling? Is his ceiling ever getting back to the majors, or is he just going to be a guy that potentially could come up every once in a while and is maybe mainly there to be thrown in as a trade piece?
Well, I think he could maybe get back to the majors at some point over the course of the season, just because of all the players that over the course of the year. There would have to be just something clicking for him with his. It had to take a pretty substantial adjustment for him to all of a sudden have more impact on the ball, because there's just not a whole lot other like avenues for him to change as a player when he's already filled out and when he's already had a decent amount of reps in the high minors. So it will take some sort of mechanical adjustment. Yeah, we'll just have to see whether that takes effect. But the probability is pretty low. He does seem. I remember last year when he was having a disappointing year, there was some conversation about how it was unfortunate that he was a quad A player. And unfortunately, at this moment, there's some question about whether he's actually a triple A player just because he struggled at the triple A level last year. So my hopes are relatively low, but it's always good to, when you have the opportunity to have more talent in your organization, that is always a good thing. So I think it is ultimately just for the slim chance that something does click with him, it's always nice to have him around, even if it's in a diminished role one way or another.
Yeah, to go from that, let's talk about who the Marlins did acquire. Jonah Bride from the Oakland Athletics and play third base, first, and second base, almost all the infield. For Jonah Bride, not a free agent until 2029. Struggled a bit when he came to the Oakland Athletics, hitting 171, OPS of 490. But you kind of look at his numbers in Vegas and AAA, again, with the PCL, it is a hitter-friendly league. At every park, it seems like it's going to be like Coors Field, very hitter-friendly, had a 976 OPS. So when you look at Jonah Brides, are you looking more his AAA, his majors, or is the majors just a flub? Is it just the PCL, just the inflated numbers, or do you think he could be somewhere in the middle between those two stat lines?
If you break it down really, Danny, it comes down to that this guy has never been a power hitter. I think that he will not be a power hitter in his major league career, and I do think that a lot of it was inflated, as you said, by PCL. I don't think this guy, honestly, in my opinion, I don't think he's going to hit 13 home runs in a single season in Major League Baseball. Maybe he'll surprise us, and maybe he will. But I don't think so. I think he's more of a base hit guy. I think he's more of an on-base guy. But what he does have is exceptional plate discipline and exceptional plate presence. So I really think that this is more of like the Xavier Edwards type signing that the Marlins did a little bit ago. Of course, this guy only hits righty and Xavier hits both sides. But yeah, I really think that this guy's more of the base hit guy and take what you can get and walk kind of guy. Doesn't really have fantastic speed either. I wouldn't say just 5 stolen bases last year. I don't think he really has great speed either. So yeah, I definitely think it's more of a utility style guy, utility style signing, utility style piece. Which is where I think he'll wind up. But he does have very good flexibility. These guys even played catcher for like 11 games 1 year. So, yeah, this guy can literally play wherever you need him. Kind of that super utility guy that's going to get you a base hitter or walk off the bench. And you need guys like that around your team. So it does say something that the Marlins are wanting this guy instead of Groshans, which just goes to show, like what we were saying before, how far Groshans fell. Because this guy doesn't hit for power either, as Eli was saying, at all. And I don't think that he will. But I do think that he can provide you with some good on-base numbers. Hopefully that permeates the major leagues. But he's always done it. That's been his calling card for a long time. And I think that's probably what you'll see from him as a big leaguer, too. Definitely think he has a very good chance to make the Marlins out of spring training. But we'll see what happens.
I found this cool stat. It's all the way in the top right on Jonah Bride. This is the separation between your weighted on-base average and your expected weighted on-base average through Baseball Savant and StatCast data. He was among guys that played as much as he did in the majors last year. He had the biggest gap in either direction, but he had one in terms of being underperforming what the like batted ball stuff said he would. His expected number, that's right around league average. That's right around what you get for a player that's OPSing like 720, 730. His actual number was like in the 400s, where he was one of the least productive hitters in the biggest when he was up here. He was at 490, but he was still walking at a decent rate, and he was making contact at a slightly above average rate. Even last year when he was terrible, the difference was the hits weren't falling for him, and especially the extra base hits weren't falling. Even when he hit balls pretty well that had chances to be doubles in other circumstances. So that's going to even out. It's not quite as terrible as the numbers would suggest. This is simply, at the very least, what you're looking at is he going to be an upgrade over Groshans for the 2024 season. I think entering the season, I do have more faith in him than I would in Groshans. I think Groshans he kind of hit rock bottom last year. Maybe he makes that adjustment eventually, but entering the year, I think I would be more optimistic about Bride because of as an overall player and his overall approach. He also has minor league options left the same way that Groshans does. And as I touched on before, the best case scenario is that Groshans clears waivers and stays in the organization, and you still have both of them. So you just have one ahead of the other on the depth chart. That is what the team is going for. But yeah, they just cash considerations. It tells you it's usually like a 5-figure sum that they don't disclose. It's something below $100,000. So for that amount, I think this makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so nothing to get super excited about, but I'm just, this guy's a little bit better than his actual results would suggest.
The two things he has to fix before we go to Kevo, the two things he has to fix, Eli, is got to come by a little bit more contact. I mean, 87 mile an hour exit velocity, that's probably not going to do it, especially when you don't have great speed in the major leagues. And then you've got to stop putting the ball on the ground. This guy had like a 50% ground ball rate last year in the big leagues. You can't do that, especially when you have no speed, or average speed. So yeah, those two things have to come up for this guy to succeed, but hopefully the Marlins can bring it out of him. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, now we're joined by Kevin, who is in the press box for City de Caribe. Kevin, before we get your thoughts on Jonah Bride, two things I want to talk to you. First, how was it on Effectively Wild? You were on Effectively Wild podcast with Fangraphs. Just talk to us a little bit about that, because that is such a huge honor.
Yeah, as you said, it was a huge honor. They're great people. Ben and Meg, they do a great job over there at Fangraphs and with the Effectively Wild podcast. So yeah, good experience and fun talking Marlins with them.
And now you're joined there with two-time champ Alex Aguirre for Ciudad de Caribe. Talk to us about the experience, because you've been to the majority of the games there. You just saw a thriller between Panama and the Dominican Republic. You're about to see Venezuela play right now. The semis are set, but again, this is seemingly just all for seeding. Just tell me about your experience on Ciudad de Caribe, and did it meet expectations? Did it just over your expectations? Just how was it, or how's it been?
Yeah. I mean, it's been an awesome experience. I don't think there has been one bad game in this Caribbean series besides maybe I want to see the 9-1 loss that the Dominican Republic suffered. Aside from that, every game has been almost just as competitive as I thought it would be. Yeah, and at this point, it's just all seeding. So right now, Panama won, but if Venezuela wins, they clinch the number 1 seed, and they'll be taking on Curacao tomorrow at 3:00. But if Nicaragua gets their first and only one of the Caribbean series, it'll be Dominican Republic versus Venezuela in the semifinals. So that'll certainly be interesting. And, it's been a really interesting Caribbean series because, especially for Nicaragua, I mean, they're 0-5. Their manager is expected to be fired at any moment. Yesterday, he did not even come out for the press conference. So, yeah, but aside from that, it's been a great experience. I mean, you can see it right there. Christian Bethencourt, he's been having a great Caribbean series. Had a home run today, his first in Lone Depot Park and his first ever Caribbean series home run. He's played in a couple himself, so I was able to catch up with him, and he said it means a lot. Now that he knows he's able to hit the ball out of this ballpark, he although it was a wall scraper, but it still counts. So yeah, it's been fun so far. This Panama team's really legit, so I'm excited to see what they bring to the table tomorrow, whoever they face.
Yeah, and with these 4 teams, just were there any surprises? Again, Panama, I don't think a lot of people had them going 5-1, and we're Curacao just going over Puerto Rico, eliminating them. Just a bit surprising, but again, when you look at the Curacao lineup, there's a lot of former Major League guys. Kevin, how do you look at these Final 4 teams, and how do they stack up against each other?
Yeah, I think the one that should surprise everyone is Puerto Rico. They got off such a good start. Their pitching was a little iffy, but their bullpen was really good. And the offense was obviously there. I mean, their bottom of the lineup is one of the best in the Caribbean series. And then the game against the Dominican Republic, they sat out 4 starters. So that certainly hurt them, and they lost that game. And against Curacao, they got shut out. Curacao got shut out the day before by the Dominican Republic. And today, Curacao shut out the Puerto Rico and Yadi Molina. So definitely, that's been my biggest disappointment. But it's nice to see Curacao getting in for the first time. I know they only started last year, but with how much their pitching struggles through this tournament, it's really nice to see them get in. They have a lot of Major League experience, or former Major Leaguers. You have Jerickson Profar, Didi Gregorius, Anderson Simmons, Jonathan Scope, and Roger Bernardino. I mean, you have a lot of guys in that lineup. So we'll see what happens with Bernardino. He got injured today very early on in the game, some back stiffness. So we'll see if he plays. But, former Marlins prospect Cody Mincy was out there. He went 6th in the 3rd. So I know Eli was waiting. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hey, it's nice to see him going at it there, and obviously nice to see someone like Christian Bethencourt getting going here early at his new home. So it's been a fun experience. Emilio Bonifacio, also a former Marlin, out here as well. So he is playing really well. So excited to see what they roll out with tomorrow and what the games turn out to be, because if you have a DR versus Venezuela semifinals, either Curacao or Panama are going to be in the finals. So it's cool to see, and it's definitely been a very fun experience, despite being in this ballpark maybe more than I am at my house.
How's it been media-wise, seeing all the different kinds of reporters from all these countries coming in for the series? Just how's it been seeing the media overflow? Is it more than what you expected in terms of media show out? Just how has that been, and maybe also the attendance of fans?
It depends the games for media and fans. So, for example, today in this Dominican Republic game, there were a couple media here. There was about 8,000 fans, but then there are games like the one we saw very recently, which was Nicaragua and Panama, which had less than 100 people in this ballpark, but they still counted as 4,000 paid tickets. So it really just varies. I mean, and then the press box in terms of that, like for Nicaragua, Panama, there's barely anyone in here. It may have been less than 10 people. So just how I see it. And aside from that, the most attended game I want to say was Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic at 35,000 people. So certainly a cool to have that, or is Venezuela, Puerto Rico, one of the two. But 35,000 people in this ballpark, the most ever in Caribbean Series history. So definitely cool to see that Lone Depot Park had that, honor to do that. So yeah, and then media, a lot of media. I mean, it's crazy. So yeah.
Yeah,
I'm kind of upset you didn't shout out the other, the Florida Marlin that is playing, former Florida Marlin that is playing in the Caribbean Series. It's Jorgen Cavanerio. He is playing in this series. He was a Florida Marlins pitcher at age 16. He was
yeah, he's a Florida Marlins prospect.
Well,
Yeah.
not on the Marlins. I mean, he was with the organization when they were the Florida Marlins.
Here's your former Florida Marlin, Alex Sanabria, who pitched for Puerto Rico. He was unfortunately injured, but he was on a roll before that. And then, not a former Florida Marlin, but a 2012 Marlin, Venezuela pitching coach Carlos Zambrano. So you have the dynamic of Ozzie Guillen and Carlos Zambrano in that dugout. Certainly an interesting one, but it's been fun. This is also Ozzie Guillen's first return to Lone Depot Park, or now, what it was Marlins Park at the time. But we saw a pretty wild first night, and aside from that, it's been pretty calm ever since.
Yeah.
You didn't mention Jeff Kinley, former Marlin.
He shoved for Mexico the other day. I think it was their only other win they had. So, yeah, he was really good for them.
This is a translated tweet from our buddy at Danny Alvarez Montes. Pretty interesting, because I was a little confused about how exactly the finances would work here between the Caribbean Federation and the Marlins themselves, but he's reporting 15 to 16 million of extra money coming in from these games. And I think this probably isn't quite final, because I guess there's still the possibility that they sell more stuff for the semifinal games and the final than they've already sold. So yeah, this is people are wondering, fans are wondering if this money's going to go back into the team itself. This counts. What else are they going to do with all these profits from this? They're not going to get this every single year, but they've already been not that far away from the 2026 WBC, and there have been rumblings that Marlins are going to get to host a good share of games for that as well. Like, this stuff does make a difference in a way that other major league, as we've kind of been documenting, this is the first time ever that's been in this Caribbean Series has been in a major league ballpark. This is a benefit that the Marlins are getting that other teams don't. So even if this is a franchise that cries poor when it comes to TV money and attendance during the regular season, like, this helps even the playing field. I'll be fascinated to see this actually does trickle to the major league team at some point.
Do we know how much the Marlins made for the WBC? Is that out there?
That's a good question.
You would have to think it's more.
They hosted, in total, it's about the same, maybe a few more games. They didn't have triple headers, they had double headers. At the same time, attendance for those games on average was even stronger than for these. And I imagine the ticket prices were a little bit higher. I would speculate that it was even more profitable, but it's also, you think the revenue split is a little different between them and the powers that be with WBC. So it'd be overall, this is the team has done well on this particular front in terms of helping themselves. And it propels this big dilemma as to how it is that these people, for this series in particular, no offense to the players, but these are mostly minor leaguers or free agents or unsigned players. Even if they had former big league experience, like, the quality of baseball here is it's not even close to what you see during a major league regular season game, but yet the attendance is comparable overall to that. And the enthusiasm in the stands, especially for the bigger games, is pretty awesome. And we think that a lot of these people are in South Florida. They do live around here. Some of them travel from these other countries and they travel from elsewhere, but a lot of them live locally as well. And this team is still trying to crack that code and get these people as excited about regular season baseball as they are about tournament baseball.
The only thing
could be even better. Yeah, the only thing I would say just really quickly that could be even better about this, and it's great to see that Daniel has this report that the Marlins made some good money out of this, which is great. But I think the one thing that could be better, like Kevin, you kind of said it, is the start times of these games. Like, even if they're the smaller games, like 10:30 start, and then you're finishing up with an 8:30, and there's no pitch clock, and the games are going into 2-3 a.m. It's a little bit much to expect fans to kind of stick around to continue to spend money, especially if you're at the ballpark, and then viewership as well on TV, which goes into these figures that are on your screen. So I really think that something that can be improved next Serie del Caribe is definitely maybe split it up, maybe put some of the games in Tampa or wherever, like do two parks instead of just one, so that more people will watch the games they want to watch and more people will attend the games that they want to attend. So I don't know. I think that maybe next time there could be a little bit more of some logistical improvements, right, in terms of how the schedule lines up. But that's my only thing. I think that is probably something that can be improved in the future, just because of what we've seen, or just get the pitch clock, and maybe that would solve it as well. I don't know, but yeah, either way, something's got to change logistically there, because some of the times of these games has just been ridiculous. But that's my only gripe. Other than that, I've had fun watching these games. I watch a lot of minor league baseball. A lot of this, like you said, Eli, is minor league oriented in terms of the quality of baseball that's being played. A lot of players at the back end of their careers, a lot of players that are unsigned, like you said. So it's similar to like a AAA game, you know. But you know, it's been fun, and it's been fun to watch, and I'm glad that Kevin and Noah have gotten the experience to cover it. It's been cool to watch.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to touch on, actually. You know, I don't think the start times is much of an issue as no pitch clock. I mean, some of these games go over 4 hours. If these games were about 2 hours, 40 minutes, which is right now the average time with the pitch clock, maybe some teams would actually have the opportunity to actually take VP, because a lot of these teams, you know, and I think Noah showed you guys in the private chat just how crazy it gets down in that little tunnel. Every team enters and leaves the ballpark through that tunnel, and then there's media presence there. And players have to wait outside the clubhouses for these games to finish. So it's just a whole madness thing down there. It's not very well coordinated. Just personally, in my opinion, there were talks of playing some of these games at FIU, and that just never, nothing really got to the point where they're actually going to start these games there, where they could have, because the season doesn't start till next week. But again, you could look at some of these games, how they've been attended, and you could have thrown the lesser known games like a Nicaragua, Curacao, for example. You could have put it there. And there's some of the games. I mean, the Panama one is 3 hours and 21 minutes. So there were some games that were over 4 hours long. And then there's games like the one yesterday
in here.
Then there's some games like the one yesterday with Panama. It was Curacao versus Dominican Republic, which is a less than 3 hour game, which is now what we're seeing in Major League Baseball. So definitely need to add the pitch clock. I know not all winter leagues use it, but I think the Venezuelan league does, and I don't know about the Dominican one, but they definitely need to start using them. So then this could be something that we see a lot, you know, because this can't happen. I mean, you know, fans are here until 12 o'clock. Media is here until almost 1:30. That's really tough for not only, you know, the players who have to play these games, and there are times where they play the morning game the day after. They have to be back at this ballpark for like 9 o'clock, not take BP, throw for a couple of minutes and go out there. You know, it's definitely a rough situation there. So hopefully, you know, next year it's in Mexico. Maybe they do 2 ballparks then. And same goes with Puerto Rico. But really, Lone Depot Park is the only real place you could play this game in Miami, because you look at the other options like a Mark-Light Field or FIU, those are outside. Weather factors into that. They're not turf. So there's a lot to take away from those. And I think Carver says right. I think Tampa would be the ideal spot, as much as, you know, for media, travel would be an issue. Tampa, you know, turf field, no, you know, roof is there. It's probably the easiest environment you'll get despite bad attendance.
Let me ask you guys this before we head into break. You mentioned the stadiums. What would you guys think in terms of the spring training locations? Having it maybe in a Fort Myers, you have it at Roger Dean, affiliated with the Marlins. You could have it in West Palm. Again, all those places closer than having it to go to Tampa. Again, we see games there. Only thing might be the weather. Do you guys see maybe spring training locations as ideal for maybe some of these lesser group games, like you mentioned, a Nicaragua, you know, maybe a Curacao type? Would you guys be in favor of a spring training, or do you guys want to keep it MLB style?
I think it's easier to keep it MLB. Just you get better results, as we've seen for most of these games. And honestly, tomorrow, despite the time of games, I think we're going to get really good results for these semifinals. You know, Lone Depot hasn't sold every seat here. There's times where the outfield isn't being sold on ticketing market apps or even the upper deck. But for the most part, there is a good fan attendance here. You know, you see it in the lower bowl. There's almost all of it is filled up. You get 10,000, 12,000 fans. I do think semifinals will have more than that. So I do think you got to keep it Major League. It's really difficult to play these games in minor league stadiums where, for the most part, there's no outfield seating, which maybe helps for some games, as you mentioned, Daniel, like in Nicaragua, Curacao, even Panama, honestly. They don't have many fans here either. So that's just the way I see it. I think Major League is the best way to go. And the drive from Miami to Tampa is, 3-4 hours? So it's not the worst thing either. You make that drive. You keep some teams in Tampa. You keep them in some in Miami. I think something that Noah had mentioned to us not too long ago was maybe adding 2 more teams. You add a Cuba. You bring back Cuba and Colombia. That's a lot easier to actually do as you have 7 teams. So it's a lot more difficult to kind of coordinate those games because you definitely always have a team that needs to travel up and back or back and forth, something like that.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and head to a break. And after this, we're going to have a little more Caribbean Series talk, but just on Christian Bethencourt. Kevin, if you want to stick around for that, we have agenda to push for Bethencourt. But if you want to go, again, you can follow Kevin as you'll have the rest of tonight's game. But we'll be here after the break to talk more Marlins. So stay tuned.
We have been representing people injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
As always, you can check out Berger and Hicks on their website, or you can give them a call and also check them out on Instagram and TikTok. Yes, on TikTok, as we'll have a little flipped fish here for you before we get into a little Christian Bethencourt talk, and it's former Marlin in athletics. Eli, I'm going to let you take it away.
It's a little out of order. We usually do this going into the break, but I wanted to make sure to include this one in light of the trade, the tiny trade to get Jonah Bride, and also the fact that it's basically 1 year anniversary of the JJ Bleday AJ Puck swap. I felt that a Marlins and A's trade it engendered these ideas of someone that played for both of these teams at some point during their career. Yeah, with these, we just want you to guess who this is. They played for both the Marlins and the A's. A recently retired outfielder, batted from the left side, from Florida himself at this moment, 39 years old. Pretty solid career overall. Nearly 15 WAR, 149 homers, a 111 OPS plus in his career. Can anybody figure out who this is? You can tell us in the live chat. I think this one leans on the slightly easy side. I think it's slightly easier than average on this.
Oh, okay. More. You have the Carver. I want to hear Alex. I want to know if Alex has it.
So I do know it. At least I'm pretty sure I do. Nah, I think it's Matt Joyce. I think.
There we go.
Yeah.
Matt Joyce? It's Matt Joyce.
Yeah.
Guy.
I was gonna say Coughlin, but I don't think so. I don't think it's Coughlin. So yeah, I think it's Matt Joyce. Yeah, it is. There you go.
Yeah, the Marlins were the second to last stop of his career, but
he was on that COVID year.
Yeah, he was on that playoff team. He was kind of pressed into duty. He wasn't on, he wasn't on the initial roster. He was on a minor league deal, but then very quickly he was forced into action, and he played probably more than anybody would have wanted him to, including in the playoffs. He was on the postseason as well. Like, I think he was in the lineup for most of their games that time. Yeah, Josh Willingham would have qualified too.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I was gonna say Coughlin, and then you pointed out the WAR, Eli. I was like, yeah, I don't think Coughlin was that good with the WAR. So yeah, gotta be Joyce.
Let's talk about another former Marlin, former A, Christian Bethencourt. That's another guy you could do right there, former A Marlin, and just how he's just been having such a great series. I want to talk about this and translate it in terms of maybe what can we expect going into the season. And with Christian Bethencourt, again, the minimal numbers here in 23 at-bats, 27 plate appearances, but he is batting .261, and he's slash line 370, 478, 848 OPS. Again, it's going to be difficult for him to maintain that, but maybe a silver lining is all these numbers are happening in Lone Depot Park. He already has the same amount of career home runs in Lone Depot as Jacob Stallings, so that could also be maybe something of note there in terms of him picking up steam with home runs, getting more of a power hitter compared to Stallings. Eli, you've seen these games, you've seen Bethencourt play. Just how do you think he's been doing in his limited action and Lone Depot? Is this something that the Marlins can look forward to, him just playing as well as they are? Oh, you're muted.
Replay of his home run from today. The one that you were talking about hit to center field almost 400 feet against a former big leaguer, but a former big leaguer that was throwing a 90-mile-per-hour fastball right down the middle. So the other thing is we do have StatCast numbers from all this stuff during the tournament, and it does stand out the just lack of nastiness and stuff that most of these pitchers have. The most exciting thing I would say about his performance has been the low strikeout rate. It's only 11%, only 3 Ks and 27 plate appearances. But that's also like the shadiest part of it because of the kind of pitching that he's facing. That's the one thing that you probably can't take much away from, just because the quality of stuff he's facing is overall, it's like the equivalent to AA pitching, maybe AAA on some days. But that is kind of a big difference in allowing these guys to make more contact than they might otherwise in the big leagues. Still, the power does stand out from not just this, but he's had some other very hard hit balls. He had that during the big rally that they had a few games ago in the bottom of the 9th inning. He had this really hard hit double down the line that was well over 100 exit velo as well. That came in handy and proved to be a critical part of the game. Also, even as a base runner, I'd say that is, of all things, that's like the biggest deficiency of the many deficiencies that Jacob Stallings had. Was that Stallings was like the slowest guy we've ever seen, whereas with Bethencourt, he's had some runs down the first base line that have really like opened my eyes. Things that are pretty similar to Nick Fortes. If you combine those two, put a tweet out there a few days ago. I don't know if there is a faster catching tandem in all baseball than Bethencourt and Fortes. So even if they're not hitting the ball over the wall, that's just an extra way that they can create a little bit of value that you usually don't expect. Mm-hmm. So he's caught a couple games. He played first base today. He's played it a couple times, and then he DH'd once. With the Marlins, that's probably, I think they'll probably limit him to catcher. But if he gets really hot, if he's in some of his really hot stretches, then maybe he is somebody that could sneak a DH day one time or another. Either way, it's really good for him to be doing this, and simply playing in this ballpark is important. That's not something that should be glossed over because of the history of other hitters being acquired by this team and having good track records, even better ones than he has. Players coming here that are really accomplished and they think they're really confident in themselves, and then they just can't perform in this ballpark for whatever variety of reasons, regardless of where the dimensions are and what the conditions are. With him, this is like a baby step that leaves you a little bit encouraged that he won't be tripped up the way that some of these other guys have been.
Yeah, and you look at what he's been playing in the lineup. He's been a lot of the cleanup hitter. They've had him right after Ivan Herrera, another catcher, another guy who looks like he'll be the starting catcher for the Cardinals. Do you think that's something that's helping him a little bit? Him being someone that's being expected to come up with these big hits in these situations. Again, the pitching has not been major league level at all. You mentioned AA, AAA, and even some days could even be high A type pitching that you're getting from some of these guys. But again, him being put in that 4 hole, do you think that's maybe boosting his confidence to maybe swinging more? Or do you think maybe when he is eventually, on major leagues, he's someone that's going to be in the 7-8 hole?
Well, I've also seen he's not been crazy aggressive. There have been times where he has taken walks that he's absolutely needed to in these games, which is another part of his game that at times has been problematic. I had not realized this. I'm just pulling up the numbers now just to double check for all the complaints about this team last year being a team that was right near the bottom of the league in walks and had some players that just were way too over aggressive. Bethencourt is on the extreme end of guys that swing early in counts. Last season, he swung at the first pitch 55% of the time. Ooh. That is like doubled the league average. That is way above Avi Garcia territory. That's above even Luis Ariz. When Ariz is feeling it, swing at the first pitch 55%. And even before that, last year in 2022, when he had a lot more success, he was at 52%. There have been other years earlier on where he's consistently in the mid 40s, with league average being like 29. That is, that's something that you'd love to see an adjustment from that regard. It really, there's times where you can be selectively aggressive, where if you feel like your advanced scouting is up to snuff, that and you can ambush that first pitch, you have a really good idea of what you're getting and where it's going to be located, then swing away. But I feel like that is something that's been holding him back in terms of just getting on base in the first place. The reason why they were able to acquire him for cash considerations as like a glorified waiver claim is because he had a 254 on base percentage last year. And that really limits your ceiling as a player to be at best like a backup and not really have an opportunity to be a whole lot more than that. To get that closer to respectability, even if it's always going to be a weakness of his game, yeah, you'd love to see him just enter his plate appearances with more composure and trust that even if you do fall behind in the count, that he has enough ability to like do damage even later on.
Yeah, and we've also seen him his catching, the ability to pick off base runners, his defensive capabilities behind the dish. And we've seen these Panama games, they've been kind of relatively close. Not one has been out of line in terms of pitching. Just for you, Eli, how do you think he's been? Maybe he could be in the Caribbean series, his defense, the way he's controlling these pitchers, the way he's maybe holding runners on bases, and maybe what that can be used for the Marlins. Do you see him more maybe with what type of pitcher? Do you see him more with Luzardo, Garrett? How maybe that might translate for him?
It's definitely the strength of his game is his throwing in both his arm strength and his accuracy. And that's the reason why we liked the acquisition at the time, is because the Marlins were about as bad as any team in baseball at controlling the running game, making strong and accurate throws. And he's on the other side of that. If you blended that with the rest of what Nick Fortes does, then you'd have a pretty elite defensive catcher. Unfortunately, you can't do that when one of them is on the field. That means the other one is off of it. So that's also why there's like some diminishing returns if you can't combine them. And if he's not going to teach Nick Fortes how to throw, I don't think that's really how it works. If that was the case, that'd be awesome. But at least it is something to keep in mind. And it does make more sense to pair him with pitchers that are slower to the plate. With Fortes, he has this great chemistry, as we've seen with Luzardo and Braxton. He was their exclusive catcher for every single game last year, even including the postseason, and they stuck with that. They both happen to be lefties, and especially Luzardo is good at controlling the running game on his own. So that kind of just leaves this pretty natural fit for Bethancourt to work with the righties in this rotation, especially with Yuri. I think that those two, I would guess, are going to be paired a lot together. Because last year, very quietly, saw Yuri Perez that he was relatively slow to the plate. For all the things that he has in common with Sandy for good, that's the one liability in his game as well. We're not going to see Sandy this year, but we're expecting to see almost a full season of Yuri if he's able to like pace himself appropriately. And I think that's going to be a pretty natural fit in that regard, to have them working together like that. If we think about the rest of the rotation, I guess if Edward Cabrera is still here, that's a big question with his name flying around as a trade possibility. That'd be another one. It seems kind of simple. Not all teams do that. There are other teams that are just more flexible with their assignments. They don't have personal catchers for certain pitchers. With him, because that is just the one standout strength of his game. And also the fact that he is bilingual. So maybe that's another consideration as well, is that he's, for these Spanish-speaking guys, even if they're comfortable working with Fortes, it goes to a different level if you're bringing somebody else that is totally on the same page with you on and off the field. I'd expect him to – we'll get confirmation really soon, though. That's what's nice about the timing of this. We're just a week away from pitchers and catchers reporting, and we'll see, based on who's catching whose bullpen sessions in Jupiter, we'll get a better idea of how this is going to play out.
And with that, let's go ahead maybe to one of our final topics here. We mentioned Jonah Bride, Jordan Groshans. Let's talk a little bit about Caleb Ort and the Marlins getting Declan Cronin from the Chicago White Sox. Declan Cronin, a relief pitcher, a righty, coming from the White Sox, had limited experience in the majors last season, and with that experience was it not great at all. 11 earned, I believe 12 earned runs and 11 innings pitched, a 9 ERA. But if you go ahead and maybe look at some more of his minor stats, relatively pretty good. How he's been with Charlotte and AAA, AA with Declan and Eli. How do you believe Declan maybe will fit in terms of the minor league stage, and maybe him, compared to maybe even Caleb Ward? And how do you believe Declan Cronin can have a mainstay on this Marlins roster?
This is the end game here is really similar to the Groshans and Bride deal, where their fingers crossed they're going to be able to hold on to both of them. They took the guy that they feel is, I guess, more deserving of a roster spot, the one that has, because he's a lot younger than Ort is, because he was a little bit more consistent in the minors the last 2 years combined. Yeah. And I think he even has additional options compared to what Ort has. I know Declan still has all three of them intact, and I think Ort is a little bit less. Then they wanted to make sure to get him right now while they had the opportunity. So he appeared in with the White Sox during the season, but he was actually on the Astros roster after the year. I mean, the one thing that raises your eyebrow in both of these cases is with Bride, he was DFA'd by the A's, which you put them in the conversation of one of the worst teams in baseball. And this is a guy in Cronin that in December, he was DFA'd by the White Sox. He was on the White Sox, and they decided they didn't even think it was worth having him on there throughout the whole offseason. And they are just on the ground floor of a pretty extensive rebuild. So these two teams that are about as far away from being competitive as anybody that don't feel these guys are worth 40-man spots. Why should the Marlins feel that they are worth 40-man spots? But it's all about what ideas that you have to make them a little bit better. Yeah, with him, former super late round draft pick, and the numbers in the minors don't really jump out that much, because even for a guy that's been working pretty much exclusively as a reliever in the minors, he's pitched 184 innings with 150 strikeouts. That's a well below average strikeout rate for a reliever. It's a 3.8 ERA. He's got decent control, and overall he's got like comfortable platoon splits where you trust him against both lefties and righties, but he's not actually good against either one. Like, there's not particular matchups that stand out. When he was in the majors last year, he was splitting time between being, what should I say? He's splitting his pitch mix about 50-50 between throwing fastballs and sliders. So, and when we talk about a slider striking guys out, we always got to bring up Giancarlo Stanton, see what he's up to. So there he is, going down looking on one that he actually missed his spot. It's mostly down and away, got down and in. So yeah, he was leaning pretty heavily on that to finish off plate appearances, but in small sample, the numbers overall in the majors, they were not good. It was that ERA right around 9. And yeah, so there's not a whole lot. The velocity is like right around average, maybe a little bit below average. He throws like 94 on average for a righty reliever. That's just nothing particularly special right here. A lot of it is going to come down to the slider, being able to locate it well. There are guys in the system like Anthony Maldonado that people are really hyped about, but almost all that is because of his slider as well. Yeah, so not a whole lot to say with this regard. I don't think I don't see a path with him like making the opening day roster. They'll just see how things go in camp. There's still some, believe it or not, there's still like a lot of guys on this market. We should probably make sure to cover this ongoing rumor about Gio Urshela, that there seems to be a little bit of legs to that the Marlins might finally
make a major league deal. Let's see.
Maybe they're like a finalist for him, along with the Mets and the Yankees for Gio. And now I see the Angels are somehow still. Oh no, the Angels. Yeah, the Angels and Marlins have made the latest from Brian Hoke of MLB.com. I'll find that. So yeah, there's still a chance that they'll need extra 40-man spots. So I would just say to Declan Cronin not to get too comfortable here. They'll have to really like turn some heads in spring training in order to make sure that he holds on to that spot throughout spring training. He really is one of these fringe guys at the moment.
Yeah. And we could go from that to maybe a couple other fringe guys that have become fringe guys since this. And I'm talking about the JT Realmuto trade. I know John Rodriguez is in the chat. I know he has opinions still on this trade, and it's the 5-year. You could say anniversary, you could say bustiversary, you could just say, whatever you want about this, but it is the 5-year anniversary of this trade. The Marlins trading JT Realmuto, getting Sixto, Jorge Alfaro, Will Stewart, and international bonus pool money, who might be the star of that trade for the Marlins. And we'll get in a little bit into that. But for Eli, I want to ask you, how do you believe the Marlins have handled losing that mainstay catcher since 2019? It's been a revolving door of guys coming in and out, but JT's still with the Phillies, still relatively pretty well there, hitting wise, defensively for the Phillies. Just what have you seen the Marlins handle that catching position since him?
They're not really all that much closer to a solution now than they were back then. It felt like the closest that they have been to making that pivot was bustiversary. Yeah, the closest they were to making that pivot at the position seems right off the bat when they got Alfaro. There was genuinely stuff to like about him. He was a StatCast darling even before he came over from the Phillies. And for a lot of that first year with the Marlins, maybe people forget, like, that was kind of exciting. He showed he was an incomplete player. He drove you crazy with some of his swing decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, the athleticism that he had behind the plate was remarkable. He had some moments where he showed signs of a lot of maturity behind the plate. He hit the ball so hard. He just was a really unusual athlete for his position, and he got a lot of hits that first year, for parts of that first year. But he was streaky from there. Things really fell apart in 2020. By the end of that year, he was benched behind Chad Wallach for their most important games of the season. And
became an outfielder.
And that was the following year in 2021. Yeah. They're like, the bat wasn't turning around, and the defense was slowly degrading too. And those were some of the real low points of this. Some of the low decisions is the memories of him playing in the corner outfield spots where he has the arm to play. And I guess you can kind of understand it in a very vague level, but at the same time, it takes away. It's backwards. It's so counterintuitive when you have somebody that's been a catcher for so much of their career, and yet you move them down to like less important positions, and they're struggling to hit. Like, what do you have? You have a guy that's a non-tender candidate. They end up not getting much of anything in return. They traded him to the Padres for cash considerations. So that was the full circle of him going from being the number 2 piece of this deal to being somebody that also had his nice moments with the Padres in 2022. But then last year, coming back to the Marlins organization very briefly, that was, people got a little too excited about that when he signed a minor league deal with them like last August, but never ended up coming up from Jacksonville. Yeah, so much of this it just comes down to Sixto, and not only about Sixto, but just his situation, which it was largely out of his control. I mean, we'll never really know the full truth about that. Suffered this shoulder injury, and they thought he got it right with surgery, and they didn't. He needed a follow-up surgery. Thought maybe that would do the trick, and it's simply that it seems to be kind of irreparably damaged in a way that every time he tries to ramp up to anything close to the intensity you need to throw, that structurally he's not in a position to repeat his delivery, to mix all his pitches. And the one glimpse that we got of him in 2023 was super depressing. Even though he seemed to be enjoying it, he had this one strikeout, and he went to a little dance when he had that. So even though that moment was nice to get back on the field, that injury, before that injury, he was their easy number 1 prospect. I was really high on him, even relative to some other people, in terms of what I thought he could be and how safe I thought he was as a starter. Just a really talented player, just a super deep pitch mix. He had the special velocity. He had pretty special secondary pitch in his changeup, and his command was excellent as well. I just don't think there's any coming back from that. There are certain guys that not all these injuries are created equal. Some of them, we've been a little bit spoiled. Even though there's more pitching injuries than ever, it usually seems like you can just wait for guys to get healthy, and then you hope and expect them to come back to normal. And he's been a case where it's just never gotten back to normal. So with JT, he's for the most part gone on to still be elite. This past season, not so much. Maybe this is finally the start of his decline. But the Phillies are more than happy with the value they got from that. They snapped their own playoff drought, which was pretty long at the time when they acquired him. And, by all accounts, he's really embraced being there. So it's been huge for them. When you compound that with like some of the other actual mistakes that this franchise has made, it just puts you in this really weird position where even when they have on-field success, it's just a thin organization at really important positions. And, it's led to a point where they've now done this pretty big overhaul to try to start from scratch in terms of the player development situation.
Yeah, and as for those final two pieces in that deal, we'll start elected free agency in the offseason, no longer with the organization. So that's already gone there. Then you look at international bonus pool money. As you mentioned on a tweet, the slot was around 250,000, 200,000 of that money was used to sign Yuri Perez. So you mentioned the silver lining. That could be it. When you look at it now, that trade could have just be JT Realmuto for Yuri Perez, or you could say in half of Sixto Sanchez or a quarter of him or whatever it might be. But is that how you would eventually kind of look at it, Eli, with the international bonus pool money being the star of the show?
Well, not exactly. I found that's really interesting the way that it lined up. But Yuri was not even close to the top signing of the class. That was headlined by Jose Salas and Junior Sanchez. There are a lot of people watching this that don't even know who Junior Sanchez is, even though they paid him $1 million that year. And then Ian Lewis right behind him. He got nearly $1 million. He's still in low A as of last season. But we'll never know what particular player they had in mind when they felt like they needed to get more money for the signing period. It could have been Yuri as well, but he was overall, he took up just a tiny percentage of the total pool. They would have been able to, what they knew of him at the time, they would have been able to afford him no matter what. But it's a nice little wrinkle that it made a difference there. And that's why I do remind people that international signings are a big part of this. And that is kind of been the biggest part of this Marlins offseason. This super slow and transactionalist offseason has been last month's international signings, bringing new talent into the organization. You just need a couple of those guys to really pop in order to make a big difference. And aside from Yuri, the Marlins have had so few of those guys do so in recent years. So that's going to have to turn around.
Yeah, a lot of things to figure out from now until the beginning of the regular season. We still have spring training. The catchers, pitching the catchers still have not reported yet. We're going to see how everything turns out there. We're going to have reporters on the ground there for spring training games. We'll have a meetup there for you guys to come see us, take pictures, maybe get Kevin's autograph from Effectively Wild. But maybe we'll do this little thing. Maybe we'll do a little Bustiversary segment when it really comes out. In terms of trade, see how things maybe fare out. Some Bustiversary segment there. But again, this is FOF Live presented by Burger Hits. For myself, Daniel, for Eli, for Carver, for Kevin, for the birthday boy, Noah. Again, this is FOF Live. Go Fish.